Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Okay, all right. My name is Donald Madden. I'm an alcoholic. It's going to make rodeo on Friday night like a picnic. And I'm 16 years sober on a program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's absolutely boggling to me. And I'm one of the ones that got to Alcoholics Anonymous. When I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, they told me to play with the winners. And the winners to me are people who had 30 days. People were winners to me who had 3 days. I had reached that point where there was no staying sober, where I was not able to stay sober. And you're seeing a psychiatrist 3 times a week, and you can't explain to him, because he's not an alcoholic, that it has nothing to do with anything else, but you cannot stay sober. I got here the great way. I got here mindless. And so what I did know was that you were people who stayed sober, and what I did know, finally, in my life, was I didn't have the answers, and I was mindless enough not to have any questions. I just came on board. I had been evicted from a sanitarium. Which is the final rejection. And because I still had money enough, or somebody had money enough, to pay for the sanitarium. And psychiatrist evicted me because he kept saying to me, "You've got to leave." And I finally, one morning, because I saw him every morning when I was in there, I had been in there 23 times, why did he want me to leave? And he said, because I very honestly feel you're one of those people that if you don't leave almost immediately, you may never face the world again, and you're going to be sitting facing a wall for the rest of your life. And I sat there, nearly mindless, but what my mind did say, sitting there to me, was, that's awfully dramatic. And I didn't realize how dramatic it was till I got sober and came into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had not been in rooms full of people, and I mean any people, for a long, long time. That psychiatrist couldn't even keep me in a group therapy session with 4 people. I would split. And I came into these rooms full of noise and insanity and people, and I didn't understand. What all I understood was that you were the people who knew how to stay sober, and what I wanted was to stay sober. I didn't come in here committed to sobriety on a daily basis. I came in here with a commitment to sobriety. I heard everybody in Alcoholics Anonymous talking about 1 day at a time, and that was too much for me. I mean, I found myself panicking and going insane brushing my teeth, because my head would move from the teeth into the cigarette and the shoes and the shoelaces and walking across the floor and the coffee, and I went insane. And so what I found I had to do, and if your commitment is to sobriety, you always find the way to do it just so you don't go insane. And what I found I had to do was use my head like it should be used. And what I did when I was brushing my teeth was I would brush my teeth while I was brushing my teeth while I was brushing my teeth. And when I walked across the floor, terrified of what might happen at the other side of the room, I would say to myself, all you are doing is walking across the room while you are walking across the room. It may not be there when you get to the other side. I had never all my life felt a part of anything, any place. It took me a long time and a lot of work in Alcoholics Anonymous to feel like I belonged here. And I don't mean as an alcoholic. I mean just to know that I belonged in these rooms, that this wasn't your podium and this was not your book and this was not your program, that it was mine too. And that I had as much right to be here as you did. And the thing that worked for me was I was used to working for what I wanted. I had been jilted off a gold platter when I was very young, and I went to work when I was 16. And I went to work for $25 a week, and I wanted it all, and I wanted it all right now. And what I had going for me was I was already an alcoholic. And that's what did it for me. And I worked. And I worked 6 days a week, and I worked 7 days a week, and I worked 15 hours a day, and I got it. And I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was living in an 18-room house with 3 servants, too frightened to walk in the hallways because I might run into one of them. And I had always understood working for what I wanted and going after it. I heard a man say in my first year that we come in here wrapped the same, and I hated to hear it, because I thought there was some miracle that happened with sobriety. I mean, when you come through the nightmare I'd come from to get to Alcoholics Anonymous, I thought just the fact of sobriety would change me and change it and change my life and change the world. And what I was faced with sober was me. What I have survived for 16 years is me. And that it was a lot tougher than anything I survived before getting to Alcoholics Anonymous. I had never looked at me, I had never looked at the world, I had never understood, I had never had real interaction, I had never had one-to-one relationships, and I didn't know it. I had just gone after what I wanted, when I wanted it, how I wanted it, and ricocheted off every wall in life just to get what I wanted. I didn't know when I got here this was a new beginning. I thought it was the end. I thought it was all over. I don't even know, except for that strange spark that's inside every one of us that wants to live, because that's what I came here to do. I didn't come here to get anything back, and I didn't come here to get anybody back. I came in here just to survive, and I thought it was all over. I thought I would never, ever have anything or anybody or ever again. And the fortunate thing that did happen for me within the confines of Alcoholics Anonymous is I was a mess. I weighed 145 pounds, and I was supposed to lose all my teeth, and the reason I didn't was the gum man, dentist, said, "Who is your doctor?" And I said, "I don't have one. I have a psychiatrist." So he looked at me strangely, and he called the psychiatrist, and he came back in the room, and he said, "I must feel obligated to tell you what he said to me." And I just looked at him, and he said, "For God's sakes, don't pull any of his teeth. That's all he's got going for him." The reason I hated to hear it was all I had going for me. I was one of those ones that stood nailed to the wall, smiling. And because my head did not work, and I seldom knew what I was being asked, I had to have pat answers. And the basic pat answer was, "Just fine." So if anyone said, "How are you?" I said, "Just fine." I mean, I had sat in that psychiatrist's office those last 3 years as I was going down the tubes. And I had It wasn't just that I would sit in hostile silence, which I did many times for 45 minutes. It's that I didn't have the answer he was asking for. He would ask me, "How are you?" And I would spend the time, when I did, telling him how it was. I'd tell him what was going on in my life. I didn't know how I felt about anything. I had never asked myself how I felt about anything. I had never asked myself how I felt about anybody. I just went after what I wanted. It had nothing to do with how I was feeling about it. Did I like it? Did I like doing it? Was I comfortable with those people? What was happening to my life? I never asked myself that. When I got sober, I started to have to ask myself, because I didn't understand what they were saying when they said that my sobriety was predicated on a certain kind of comfort. And I had to start getting some kind of comfort inside, because what was happening to me sober, which was why the program of Alcoholics Anonymous worked for me, is I was going insane. I was coming apart at the seams, and I didn't understand how I could be sober and be coming apart at the seams. And I knew I was going insane. I had no way of turning off the 28,000 ticker tapes in my head, and my head telling me constantly, it isn't, it won't be, it can't be, it never will be, and you're dead and you're done, and why do you bother? I had no way of turning it off. I had never had to turn it off. I had always had booze, and at the end of it, a pocket full of pills. And because when the booze really stopped working so I could function, the psychiatrist finally found something that worked for me, and it was a 250 milligram sleeping pill. And which I was his first alcoholic patient. I had 3 open-ended prescriptions out running, and I was taking 15 or 20 a day just so I didn't have to drink, because drinking had finally terrified me and terrorized me, and I never knew where one drink was going to take me. I didn't know whether it was going to take me to bed for 3 days or 5 days, and I never knew when I woke up how long I had been there. And I wasn't able to function, and my whole ability of being in your world was that I had to prove myself as a moneymaker and prove myself at whatever I did. At the last of it, I was, and it was the last 3 years, I was doing, among a great many other things, a syndicated newspaper column, and that was being published. It started off in 65 papers, and I think it ended up in like 140, 150, 160 papers, and it took interviews. And I used to go on the interviews, and I had always had a mind that had total recall. And so I used to pretend to take the interviews down. And suddenly I was having to write the interviews down. And then suddenly I couldn't read my handwriting. And then suddenly I couldn't remember having been there. And the last 2 years of that newspaper column, I wrote it mostly in the nut house. And I would get well enough one more time. And I'd call the office and say, send in my typewriter and send in the briefcase. And I'd open up this briefcase and I would look at what was in it, and I couldn't remember any of it. And the name of that newspaper column was called A Talent for Living. And I was the great judge, you see. I was the great judge of looking at other people's lives and telling everybody else in the world what they did right in their lives that was interesting. Things that you should do because they did it. And it was a celebrity newspaper column. And it was a real patsy newspaper column. I have written a newspaper column sober, I think primarily because I said I would never write again. And I think that when we're told never to say never, it's a spiritual word, you know. It's like you say it and it goes up for the black ball. I mean, every time I have ever said never, I have always had to do it. And I remember the phone call came in one night about 6:30, and an editor said to me, would you possibly be interested in doing another newspaper column? And I said, what I had learned in here, which is how I live my life out there, God help me. I said, yes. My natural thing is to say no to practically everything. I had learned to say yes in here to give myself a chance at life. I had learned to say yes in here because I had found that saying yes in here put me where I belonged, when I was supposed to be there, to hear what I was supposed to hear. And so I said yes, and she said, what kind of a newspaper column will you do? I need to know by tomorrow morning. And I said, I'll call you at 11 o'clock tonight. Is that too late? And she said, no. And I was going off to do a speaker question and answer meeting. And I came back and I called her on the phone and I said, I'll do a question and answer newspaper column. And I gave her some prototypes, and that ended up in a new Sunday supplement. And I wrote most of the questions myself. And because this was not a patsy newspaper column, and what I got mostly in the mail were rebuttals. And it was a very good newspaper column, because it was me. It was a column. I couldn't believe it, because when I started to read what they were publishing that I had written, it was really who I was, and how I thought, and how I talked, and what I really believed about the whole world of architecture, and the whole world of decoration, and the whole world of landscaping, and every cockamamie bastard in it. And including builders' wives who choose the chandeliers. And I have recently read one of them, and I thought to myself, Jesus, this sounds like it was written by a drunk. And because what the question was that I had not written, some lady wrote in and said, you're always talking about wallpaper. And whenever anybody asks you about wallpaper, you're always saying either don't use it or use it sparingly, and why do you feel that way? And the answer, I mean, I read the answer. I can't believe they published the answer. The answer was, most people think of Adam and Eve with fig leaves, when actually they were standing there naked. Now, that was published in the Santa Ana Register. For all the orange pickers, right? I mean, I think essentially, for someone who had always been terrified of what everybody else had to say about him, that whether I am sometimes or not doesn't make any difference, because what I have found in here is a lot of examples of how to stand up and be who I am. And the people I admired in Alcoholics Anonymous were the ones who stood up and were honest at the podium in here, and had the courage to stand up in a room full of people like this. And it's where I've gotten all my courage, is by looking at other people in here, and people who were willing to do whatever the hell they did in here to stay sober and reach out to other people and do all those things. And it's, I suppose, in essence, because I had no place else to pattern my life after anything. I mean, I grew up with absolutely probably no other values in the world except money, because it's who my family were. I mean, they had been that for generations. They had always gone after the money and eaten their children. And those are the values I had. And I didn't understand any other values. When I got sober, I thought I had to get it together all at once. And I went to a party one night, and some drunken guy walked up to me and said, "You're Donald Madden, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes." And I didn't even recognize him. And he said, "What are you doing now?" And I said, "Nothing." And he said, "You must have ended up with a lot of money." And I said, "I didn't." And he said, "Well, I want to say one thing to you. Yours was the most despicable use of the greatest creative talent I think I've ever known." And I said to him, "You don't know me well enough to say that." And it gave me a headache for 2 days. And because underneath I knew that he knew me well enough, obviously, to say it, because it was the truth. It was how I had run my life. I had nothing to do with creativity in me. I had gone for the money. I went for the money. And I used whatever it was I had to get the money. No one had ever told me, ever, that the name of the game in life was to go after it and find yourself. And find out what you love doing, and doing it. and that if you did that, you'd make money from it. That happened to me sober, because when I got sober, I didn't know what I was going to do. It was over. When I went to something, it dawned on me the 23rd time that it wouldn't work if I went back again, right? And another alcoholic from that sanitarium, his family took me in, and he got drunk. And so they threw him out, and I stayed. So they ended up with this sober alcoholic stranger in their house, and I felt totally cast adrift, and totally without a place, and totally without friends. I had no way of making a living. I did not know that I was so sick I couldn't have made a living anyway if you'd given it to me, which was why I wasn't given it. I came into this program with absolutely no spirituality. I didn't know the words to the Lord's Prayer, so I had no handle. I had nobody. I had never, ever been able to talk to anybody and tell anybody anything. I didn't know what was going on inside me anyway, but I had never even told anybody any facts of my life. I hadn't gone underground when I was a kid. I had gone underground during divorce suits and unfit mother cases, and I had just gone underground and started to drink when I was 14, period. And that's where it stopped. I had never, ever told anyone anything. I just talked a lot. And so when I got here, I didn't know how to talk to anybody, and I didn't know what I was feeling. I didn't know where I was going to go. I didn't know how to make any money, and I didn't know how sick I was. What I wanted was sobriety, which is what you had. My fantasy and my fear was so great that I didn't hear the word slip in Alcoholics Anonymous for almost a year. Because the fact of the matter was, if you slipped, my fear was so great that if I would accept the fact that you slipped, there was a possibility I might. And I couldn't accept that possibility. I had to believe this worked. I didn't know how to work it. I didn't know what it was, and it didn't make any difference. I could not read, so they kept saying, read the big book, and I didn't say anything to anybody. In my second year, I taught myself to read one sentence at a time. I would not go on to the third sentence until I could put the two together and remember them. What I did in here was I washed coffee cups. I was always at a meeting an hour early. I never left a meeting to the last person. And it wasn't because I was wonderful, it was because I was so terrified out there I couldn't wait to get here. And I was so terrified of leaving to go out there again that I wanted to stay and not go home. I used to cry all the way home every night. I'd walk out the doors of these rooms smiling, and I'd get in that car and cry all the way home. And I didn't know where all of you went between meetings. I mean, they told me to get telephone numbers, and I must have had 100 telephone numbers, but I didn't call anybody. And I made my first call for help. I had never asked for help in my entire life. I had gone after it always and gotten it and gotten what I wanted and never asked you for anything. I didn't know that it was all right. I thought if I told you I was wounded, if I knew I was wounded, that you might throw me away. I mean, I didn't know what happens after you say hello. I mean, I didn't know that with alcoholics, all you had to say to them is, how are you? And then listen for 45 minutes. And they might end up the conversation without even asking you how you were. I didn't know that. And I remember I was 3 or 4 months sober. And I had a head that wouldn't stop and was insane with words going through, and I couldn't sleep, and it was going. And one night I slept for a few hours, and I woke up, and it was silent. My head was silent. And I thought my mind had slipped. I thought perhaps what happened was that the pressure had been so great, my mind had caved. So I made my first phone call, and I explained the situation to this lady who spent the next hour trying to make me understand that what I was feeling was quiet and the first edge of peace and the first edge of comfort, because I had never had that. I mean, it's easy, I suppose, to sell what Alcoholics Anonymous has for you, if you've had it someplace. I heard them talking about emotions that I had never had and had never been mine. So I had nothing to relate to it when they're talking about quiet, when they're talking about peace, when you're talking about comfort, when you're talking about an ability to live in the world with other people and allow other people to be who they are. I didn't know what they were talking about. I had lived life like a fist. I had been at war all my life. I had gone out and wrested what I wanted from the world. So I didn't know. All I did was, because I wanted to stay sober, was to stay long enough for it to work for me anyway, even though I didn't understand what anybody was talking about, because it doesn't make any difference. It's just like it doesn't make any difference who God is. The mail gets forwarded. All I know is that it is. All I know is that I trust more and more and more deeply a power in my life that directs me. All I know is that I get up and have gotten up for 16 years on a daily basis, whether I have wanted to or not, whether I have believed it was going to get any better, or even if I believed it was going to be worse today, I have gotten up and put me in shape and put my surroundings in shape, because I learned that early. My pride at being sober made me shave every day. My pride of looking sober made me dress well. That's where it all started. I had to have my surroundings in place because I got confused very quickly. And if the physical world that I was surrounded with was messy, my mind went crazy. I had to have things in place and my mind stayed in place. It was all the things that I had to learn to do in order to survive sober, because I had also become a suicidal. Which is only the natural for an alcoholic when he's got no place left to run. You know, what is a small, nasty child going to do when he is stamping his feet for what he wants? I mean, you have got to say, it's thy will, but if I don't get it in 24 hours, I'll kill myself. I didn't know that anybody else in here was suicidal. I didn't know that 90% of you are, you know. When I got here, you all just looked so well. I confused it like I had all my life as your being well. I had never understood the difference between people looking well and being sick. I had never gotten that message. I have gotten that message here. I was having problems with some people in Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 5 years sober, and I had a wonderful sponsor, and we had a long talk about it, and he said, Donald, he said, number one, I want you to know, you're not dealing in a world of necessary well people. I have stayed here long enough to realize that was the grossest understatement of a century. And that's all right too, because it's become all right for me not to be mentally well, because I employ myself deeply enough in Alcoholics Anonymous to stay as balanced as is possible for me on a daily basis. I don't understand people who don't employ themselves at this program. It has taken everything. Yes, everything. I can tell you the facts of what it was like crawling through an 18-room house naked in desperate search of something to drink so I wouldn't convulse again, and finally finding a stash of wine in a back closet off the servants' hallway and breaking the necks of the bottles off and pouring it on my face because I wasn't able to walk, so I couldn't stand up. And the doorbell system had gone out in the rain, and the doorbells were going off, and I would just crawl to the door to see where the feet were underneath the doors. I can tell you all the facts of things like that. You know, I can tell you the facts of driving up to a liquor store and with the money to buy a quart of gin and being refused and getting down on my hands and knees crying and making him give it to me because it was bad for business. He gave it to me. Now let me tell you, that's not pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. I got the quart of gin. But the problem with all of that is when you're 16 years sober, you don't know what it feels like anymore. You don't know what you were feeling like. You don't know the horror of what's going on. And the horror of lying alone in a huge room, in a huge house. And it's all over, and it's all finished, and you keep trying to go on, and you keep trying to go on, and you keep trying to go on. And then they put you back in the nut house one more time. And finally you're not sober 3 months, and you're not sober 2 months, and you're not sober 2 weeks, and you're not sober 3 days. And suddenly they let you out, and you're sitting in the psychiatrist's office the next morning drunk. And he says, "How are you?" And you say, "I have half a pint of gin in my pocket." And he says, "Don't you think with your case history that's a little dangerous?" And you say to him, with total belief, "No, it's only half a pint. This is your 16th time in. And you come out another time and you're going to learn to drink like a drunk. And you come out another time and you're going to learn to drink like a gentleman. And you come out another time and they've pulled you together enough to send you to Europe on an assignment. And you go berserk in Europe. Absolutely berserk. And I was back here, and 2 station wagons pulled into that house, and I had a third of a bottle of gin down me in 4 seconds with great relief. It was the relief. It was the great relief of all time. And I remember that assignment. I was trying to back out of it, and it was a huge advance on a celebrity second book, a cookbook, with great geographic location value in it. And I had ended up on the coast of Italy, living in a villa, and what she had said to me when I tried to back out that assignment, and she doubled the advance, and she said, "I feel that you're really going through something frightening in your life." I mean, little did she know. I mean, I had that morning stood over the sink looking in the mirror saying, "How long can I get away with this? How long can I get away with coming out of that nut house and being drunk right away and then trying to hold on to it so you're not drinking during an assignment?" And she said, "I just want you to know that we want you, when you get to that villa, to stop and look out at the sky." And she said, "I feel your whole life is going to change and that everything is going to be all right and that you will have a new world." And I went berserk, and I was back in the United States in 3 months, and 6 months later I was finally in Alcoholics Anonymous. And a year and a half after that, 2 years after that, I had for the first night, it was a year and a half, 2 years later, the first night I didn't go to a meeting, and I was frightened. I was frightened not going to a meeting, and we went to the Hollywood Bowl, a whole band of us, and we sat way up in the cheap seats, and they were playing The Pines of Rome. And I started to cry because I had the feeling that she was talking about, that this was the change that this was the newness, and a whole life was starting, and I was sitting with 3 or 4 new people, whom I called friends then, even though I still then didn't know what a friend was. And that was only a 25-cent bus ride and a $2 seat away. You know, it wasn't a $25,000 advance and 5,000 miles away. It was here in Los Angeles because I was sober. I've never treated the program of Alcoholics Anonymous lightly. And the reason I haven't is because it works. The thing of meetings was, someone asked me what time this meeting was tonight, and I didn't have to look in the book. Of course it was an 8:30 meeting. Of course it started by the people who started 8:30 meetings. It wasn't started 6:32 for 45 minutes. It's an 8:30 meeting for an hour and a half. That's what worked for me when I got here, was an hour and a half meeting. That you start off with chapter 5, and you end with the Lord's Prayer. And that was magic for me. You know that, and 60 cups of coffee and 3 packs of cigarettes a day. And this program has worked for me, and I believed it would from the beginning, and I believe it now. And I'm secretary of 2 meetings in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I sponsor a small band of people. They call themselves sponsored by the damned, you know. And it's true. Because I realize in Alcoholics Anonymous, the odds aren't with us. And I realize the miracle of being 16 years sober. I realize the miracle of being 2 days sober. I realize the miracle of being 1 year sober. I have realized that a miracle right down the line. But I also realize it's a miracle I still have to work for. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
The Pacific Group is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and all members of the community are welcome to attend. The single most important aspect of AA recovery, however, is the principle of one alcoholic relating to another alcoholic. Therefore, only alcoholics actually participate in our meetings. If your primary problem is other than alcoholism, we think it would be helpful to you to contact an anonymous organization which more specifically deals with your addiction in recovery and or understanding. Good evening. My name is Annika, and I'm an alcoholic.
I'm Chuck Bernard, and I'm an alcoholic. I didn't tell Marjorie I was doing 10 minutes tonight. Otherwise, she'd have programmed me. I got 10 years. I think I can handle this one on my own. You know? I had a normal childhood. I was born in Maine, and my folks were bootleggers. My mother didn't drink, but my father and grandfather used to make their hooch. And it was always around, you know. My father was the last angry man, you know. He used to beat me up all the time. I always say this because it wasn't the first beating he gave me that used to count. You know, I could always live through that one. He'd go over in the corner and sit there and read his Life magazine and drink a few more beers and a couple of more shots. The more he'd think about what I did, the worse it got, you know. So he'd come in and give me that second time around, and boy, that one really hurt, you know. So I'd sit there for an hour and a half just waiting for him to come back in. And that's the way it was, you know. I kept getting into trouble. I don't tell this to too many people, but it's about time I get honest. I got raped in a cemetery by a cop. I was 11 years old, you know. I haven't taken a step backwards since then, 42 years ago. Yeah. I don't like cemeteries either. But I was constantly in trouble, so they sent me to school out of town. I went to Canada, and it was a preschool, and that's what my grandfather wanted me to be. He wanted me to atone for his sins, you know. So he sent me up there, and the only thing missing was 12-foot walls. It was just like a jail to me. I liked my freedom, you know. So I soon found ways to get around that. And I drank up there, and I stayed there for about 4.5 years, and they asked me not to come back. And, so I went back to Lewiston, Maine, and I was coming up the steps to go into high school over there, and I saw the same priest that was up in Canada was on the steps up here, and I said, my God, I haven't got a chance in the world, you know. And I stayed there for a month and quit. And I didn't tell my folks, and I just go out and drink, you know. My grandfather was half blind, or they said he was 90% blind. He didn't trust banks, so he kept all his money. He had a lot of property. He kept all his money in the top drawer. And I used to get up in the morning and say, the old sucker's blind, man. I'd take $50. And then he had kept this suit over in the corner of the closet he wanted to get buried in. And he kept it there. Every morning I put that suit on and go down to the pool room, you know. Spend his money. So my father was a big guy, so the older I got, the more he pounded on me, you know. I got a little girl pregnant next door, and I remember her mother-in-law. I was working in an Army-Navy store, and she walked in the store, and she said, you know what you've done to my daughter? And I said, I think so. And she says, you're going to have to get married. I said, yes, I'll marry her. And I said, when? And she said, tonight. We got married on a Saturday night, and Monday morning my first son was born, you know. And it was a ready-made family. I moved in with the in-laws, and it was just a lot of fun, you know. The old man hated my guts. But my father suddenly changed. You know, I was out of the house, I was married, he was just happy as a lark. He brought me furniture for an apartment, got me an apartment, got me all set up. He was just happy. He'd found a new drinking buddy. He didn't have to worry about me anymore. And we became bosom buddies after that for years, you know. And he'd pick me up to go fishing, and we'd drink. And, you know, I was the kind of guy, he'd say, it's your turn to buy the booze. And then he'd go home and he'd say, that cheap little son of a gun ain't going to buy no booze. So he'd buy a case of beer, and I'd buy a case of beer and a half pint. He'd buy a pint. And then the other guy that'd come with us would say, well, I better bring some reinforcements, and he'd bring some too. We were going out for a 2-hour fishing trip, you know. And that got old, and time passed by, and all these kids started coming, and, you know, I never grew up, really. I found myself in Simi Valley, and I got up one morning, and there was 13 of us at that table, and I had to build a table. I had to take 2 sheets of plywood and put them together and tile it, because I couldn't buy a table that big. And I looked over that table, and I said, God, I'm the only sole support of this family. And I wasn't working, you know. And we were on welfare thanks to my drinking. I was unemployable by then, you know. And needless to say, we got a divorce. And I walked away from there and never looked back, you know, until I sobered up. And as a drunk, I did love my kids. I didn't have, I was just a kid at heart. I didn't, you know, big family didn't bother me when I was working, and I never, after I sobered up, I tried to get my children back, you know, and it didn't work. I'm still paying for that today. Once in a while those haunts come back, you know. But I've had to release that. And Marjorie and I lost a son. He was 16 years old, and he had a heart attack, and that was hard to take. I did that in sobriety. And, you know, I lost a daughter, and one of my sons was fell off a scaffolding, and he's a paraplegic. And there's been a lot of tragedy, you know. And when they won't talk to you, it's kind of hard to tell them what you really feel like inside, you know. And you can write letters, but they never write back. And those are some. I thought I'd try and get that in to let you know that life is not always happy with me, but I'm trying. I started going to AA when I was 22 years old, and I knew I was an alcoholic then, but I just couldn't see putting that bottle down, you know. To me, I had to die with that bottle in my hand. And I went to dinner with some of the guys from the coffee crew tonight, and we were talking about one guy that can't get sober. And, you know, you can't get sober till you're ready. And I knew I was going to die with that bottle in my hand. Till I got so damn old and so tired I couldn't hold that bottle anymore, you know. And I got here, thank God. I got here, I was around 40 years old, and I stayed sober for a while. I didn't go to any meetings. I got sober in the hospital. I kept going to hospital meetings once a week, you know, and I thought that was enough, and it wasn't. I found myself in San Francisco Bay one night and drunk, and I put the bottle down. The next morning I got up, I had a couple of beers. I got home and I didn't tell anybody about it. And I didn't drink again for 2 months, and then I found myself in Santa Monica Bay, and I was looking at that little store they got there. It was advertising Budweiser, and I said, I'm cured. I haven't had a drink in 2 months. I had one 2 months ago. I laid it down. I said, I'm fine, you know. And I went and had a hamburger and a couple of beers, and the next 5 months were just hell, you know. And I just kept, I had booze. I had a meat business then, and I had booze from one end of that place to the other. And I was slowly killing myself again, you know. And the guy that I had gotten sober with 2 years before had come to the Pacific group, and he came over and 12-stepped me, and I came over here. And it took me a long time to fit into this group. You know, I wouldn't participate in anything. I wouldn't do anything. And finally, one day, I said, if I'm going to make this program work, I'm going to have to do what you people do. And I started shaking hands, and I started putting chairs away and making coffee, and after that, you couldn't stop me for the next 6, 7 years, you know. And it's been just terrific. I'm staying sober. I love my life today. You know, I love my wife. We get along real great, which is, you know, it's just terrific. And I started a new business again. I'm trying to keep this one honest, and that's a bitch. You put a cash register in front of me and look out, you know. But I'm working at it, and I want to thank Joe for asking me tonight, and I want to thank you.
Thank you very much, Chuck. Our second 10-minute speaker is Karen C.
Hi, my name's Karen Cooknell, and I'm an alcoholic. Oh, God. Tonight, I really didn't feel like coming to the meeting tonight. I've had a rough week. I'm tired, all those things. And I thought, well, I'll just show up, because that's what I've been taught to do in this group. You know, you show up no matter what. And I thought, nothing else, I can rest my eyes, you know, during the speakers and stuff. And it's real hard to do with your heart pounding a mile a minute. Speaking's not one of my favorite things. I think what's so amazing about it, though, is that I spent a lot of time during my drinking in bars. And when I got drunk, I could be very loud and very obnoxious, and I would do anything to get attention. You know, the worst thing that somebody could do is to not pay attention to me. You know, just notice me, you know? And now I don't handle it too well. God, where do I start? Okay. I'm the oldest of 7 children, and so I was, you know, a big sister. And when I was 11 years old, we moved to California from Milwaukee, and that was the first time in my life that I really felt uncomfortable, because I tried to make friends with people and I didn't know how. So it's like, you know, you kind of walk up to a group of people and try to pretend you fit in and hope nobody notices that nobody's paying any attention to you. You know, you just kind of hang out with people. And, you know, it was real uncomfortable. And a year later, my mother passed away. And I was told that I was I was being the oldest. I had to set a good example for my brothers and sisters. And I said, yeah, right. I understand that. And so I decided I had to be a grown-up, and I had to act like a grown-up. And to me, a grown-up was a person that did not get upset. They do not throw temper tantrums. They don't cry. They just take care of business, and they take care of everybody. And I tried to do that. I really did. I've tried to do that most of my life. Drinking for me allowed me to be a child. Drinking was the only way I could laugh and have fun. From the time I was 12 years old. When I was 13, I had my first drink. And I'd already learned how to stuff my feelings and to act like a grown-up and to not care. And drinking made it easier. My dad remarried a woman that was very physically abusive, kind of like Chuck. It's real. I don't remember feeling sorry for myself during that time, and I just kind of accepted it. And which today kind of surprises me, but at that time that was just a way of life. I accepted what life threw at me. I just figured this is what it's all about. And I was a survivor. I did whatever I had to do to survive and to get through life. And I just tried the hardest that I could. And all I really wanted to do was be a good person. I wanted to be a good girl because I was raised with good morals, and I was raised to want to do things right, and I wanted to, grow up and be happy. That's all I wanted, and to exist in this world. So as a teenager, I learned how to run. I ran away from home 7 times, ended up in juvenile hall. I didn't like being locked up. It wasn't fun. So I decided maybe I better, toe the line. So I did. I was 18 years old. I left home. I felt a lot of guilt because I felt like I was running out on my brothers and sisters, but I didn't know any other way. So by the time, 3 months after I left home, I had a phony ID and I was in the bars. And I had a ball. I had a good time. Most of the people I hung out with were older than myself, and I was drinking and dancing, and I thought, now I'm a grown-up. This is what it's all about. You work hard, and you get to play hard. And I spent a lot of time justifying my play. I deserved to have a couple of drinks. I deserved to relax because I worked hard. And I did. At one time, I worked 3 jobs. My dad taught me if you work hard and you get enough money and buy all those nice things, that's what life is all about. And I bought it lock, stock, and barrel. That's what I was after. When I was 20 years old, I got married, and actually I got married because I was afraid I was going to be an old maid, and he asked me, and so I said okay. So we got married, and after a year and a half, I had to get a divorce because he wanted me to do things like cooking and cleaning. And that's not what life's all about. That's hard work, It wasn't fun, and I wanted to party. I was still wanting to go out and have fun in the bars, like I had been, and that was my reward. And cooking and cleaning and doing all those things wasn't fun. So, forget this. So I got a divorce. About that time, I started getting involved with people, kind of like the jet set. A lot of well-known names, and started getting into drugs, and just kind of living a jet set type of existence, and never fitting in, never, always being afraid they were going to find out that I really was this nobody that really didn't belong there, and that at any time they were going to start laughing at me. I lived in fear of being laughed at. To me, it was like that could have been the worst thing that ever happened to me. And it gets real lonely though. It gets real lonely because when you're scared, you can't tell anybody you're scared, because then they'll know, what a terrible person you are, and they're going to know about all those little things and about all those little things you didn't do when you should have. And so I got real lonely, and I had a lot of blackouts and started waking up in places where I didn't know their names and didn't know where I was, and that started even more guilt and made me feel even worse about myself. And the whole time I couldn't figure out what my problem was. And I read self-help books, and I went to motivational seminars, and I've heard it said millions of times from this podium that, I was just trying to find out what does everybody want from me? Just what do they want? And it gets so frustrating out there, and it's just like, I never wanted to be a problem. I never wanted to be obnoxious and rude and obscene and, you know, and not know where I was and not know what I was doing and get into trouble. And when I was about 35 years, I guess I was 34 years old, and I went to a family dinner, and my cousin was there, and she was 30 days sober on the program. And we were talking, and I made some statement about this girlfriend I brought with me that, yeah, I got to take her along so she can tell me whether I had a good time or not, you know, because by that time I was, you know, blacked out every time I drank. And so, you know, I always had to take Maureen along to hold me up and to pick me up off the floor and to make sure I got home most of the time when I let her. You know, and so it got... My cousin asked me if I wanted to go to an AA meeting, and I said, sure, you know, why not? I've tried everything else. I don't know, you know. Besides, you know, I wanted to see what alcoholics looked like. And, you know, it's, okay, I'll go with you. It might be interesting. Something different, at least. I was bored to death. And I went, and it was a nice meeting. And I remember the speaker, I must have identified with the speaker because I thought, God, that poor guy. You know, I remember he talked about being locked up, and he talked about his wife leaving him, and I thought, boy, this guy's really at it rough. It's a good thing he came to this thing, you know. You know, that's wonderful. And I went home that night, and, you know, and I cried. And I cried because one more time I didn't have the answer. One more time something wasn't the answer because I wasn't an alcoholic. Drinking was not my problem. My problem was that I didn't have a good enough car. I didn't, you know, my friends weren't good enough friends. I didn't have a boyfriend at the time. My apartment wasn't nice enough. I didn't have all the things that were supposed to make me happy. And yet I was working a good job. I was making money. I was buying drinks in the bars. I was buying all the drugs, for everybody else. And yet, you know, that was my problem. It wasn't the alcohol and drugs. And the next 11 months were very lonely and very terrifying. I started getting into very dangerous circumstances and hanging out with a lot of very dangerous and, you know, physically violent people. And I started getting scared, and I started realizing, you know, there's something wrong here, and I started seeing a shrink. And my cousin would call me up every once in a while, and she'd say, you know, how you doing? And I go, oh, I saw my shrink today, and I really think we're making progress now, you know. We started talking about feelings. And, you know, it's real tough. And she goes, yeah, and she'd tell me what her sponsor, you know, was telling her. And she never once told me, Karen, you should go to AA. She never told me that I was an alcoholic. And so in the time, and I'm grateful for that because I've got an ego, and I don't like anybody to say, I told you so. So finally it got to the point where I recognized, I don't know why, but I recognized that, you know, maybe I should stay away from all these people that are drinking, and maybe, you know, then maybe that would change my life. And so I called her up and asked her if I could go to a meeting with her because I wanted to be around people that didn't drink, and I knew they didn't drink in AA. And she said, yeah, but you got to be an alcoholic to go there. And I said, well, maybe that's my problem. And I went. And it was wonderful. And my life, you know, my life has changed. I went to a lot of meetings. I got a sponsor. I started working the steps. I started meeting people. I started sharing. I started talking to people about being afraid and about being fearful and listening to other people share about being afraid and working through problems. And sobriety isn't always easy. There's a lot of pain connected with sobriety. But by golly, you know, I don't want to go back to what I had before. You know, and here I see other people getting better. And I think the miracle of AA for me is the fact that the winners in AA to me are the people that are trying to do something with their lives, and they're trying to be the best people that they can be. And that's all I want. I want to be the best me that I can be. And I'm working at that one day at a time, and the only way I know how to do that is with this program. So if you're new, I hope you keep coming back, you know, because there's a real miracle here. I'd like to thank Joe for asking me to speak, and I'd like to thank all of you for being here for me. Thank you.
We celebrate birthdays, and here in Alcoholics Anonymous, we define sobriety as 365 days free from alcohol, pills, pot, anything that affects you from the neck up. If you're planning on celebrating a birthday, please see myself or my assistant Julie on your way in, and we'll be happy to have a cake for you with the appropriate number of candles. Tonight we have some birthdays, the first of which is for 1 year for Dave K. Happy birthday.
Good evening, my name's Dave Colts and I am an alcoholic. I would like to thank God for getting me here. my sponsor Bob Zetz for his direction, Clancy for this group, and all my friends and family for showing up here tonight. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Dave. Our next birthday is for 4 years for Colleen W.
Hi, everybody. My name's Colleen. I'm an alcoholic. I want to thank my sponsor, Ruth, for my cake and for 4 years of sponsorship. Ruth has always had the grace to let me kind of move as I am comfortable. And it's taken me a little longer to get some things done, but they felt good when they were accomplished. And her kindness, I just can't say enough about it. It has kept me going for 4 years, and I thank her for it. I want to thank my friends in this group. I want to thank the girls that I sponsor. I want to thank Clancy, and I want to thank the newcomers for having the courage to be here, because I know it's not easy, but it's worth it. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Colleen. Our next birthday is for 5 years for Cindy C.
Hi, I'm Cindy, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Cindy.
And I'd like to thank Jen for giving me that cake. She's been my sponsor for 5 years now, and she practices unconditional love, and she's always been there for me. And I'd like to thank the class of '82. And I'd like to thank my dad, Walt, for being a good example for my brother and myself, and getting my brother here and then me. And I'd like to thank God. I'd like to thank all of you and all my friends here. Thanks.
Happy birthday, Cindy. Our next birthday is for 12 years for Al B.
Hi, my name is Al. I'm an alcoholic. I'd like to thank Dave Neese for giving me a place to live this year. I'd like to thank, who else did I want to thank? I wanted to thank my girlfriend Jill for giving me a place to live this year. I'd like to thank my sponsor Don for being there with me. He didn't want to give me a place to live. But one thing about sponsorship, I've got myself in a couple of jams since I've been sober, and by the time I'd get to the point where I was ready to tell Don about what was going on with me, I knew that he was in my corner and that he would back me up. He wouldn't judge me. He just was interested in me staying sober. And that was the basic criteria I have for Don being my sponsor, is that he's always been in my corner. He's always been interested in the fact that I'm staying sober, and that's all I really need from a sponsor. And it's like a computer. It's garbage in, garbage out. And if I don't get honest with him, then I get garbage. So I've had to do that this year, and it's been really good. And I'm the best person I've ever been. I am real glad to be sober and glad to be here. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Al. Our next birthday is for 13 years for Bill McD.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bill McDonald. I'm an alcoholic. Well, I stand before you 13 years later, 10 sizes larger, and with a new pair of glasses. And I got a new job today. I want to thank Clancy. He's always been in my corner. And I went to him when I was 8 months sober and going crazy, and I didn't know what the hell was going on. And he just asked me to make a commitment to Alcoholics Anonymous and do what I was, just do the things I was asked to do. And I've tried to do that since I've been here. And my life has changed. It's changed several times, but but I've gotten the one thing that I asked for when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. The one thing I've always asked for, the only thing I always look for was something to make me feel good about myself. And I found it here. And if you're new, just stay, and you'll find it too. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Bill. Our next birthday is for 14 years for Jonathan S.
Good evening. My name is Jonathan Singerman. I'm an alcoholic. And I want to thank my sponsor, Don, for sponsoring me the last 11 of those 14 years, Tom Hoy for the first 3, the Pacific Group, Clancy, and the rest of the old-timers. The class of 73, and newcomers keep coming back.
Happy birthday, Jonathan. Our next birthday is for 15 years for Tom G.
My name is Tom Green. I'm an alcoholic. And I'm glad I'm here sober and safe and sane tonight. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful to God. I'm grateful to this fellowship and to this group, and grateful for the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, particularly grateful for my sponsor who gave me that cake tonight and has been there for me when I've needed him to be there. And I want to thank a lot of people here in this room tonight that I love very much. When I got here 15 years ago, I didn't think I'd ever love anybody again. And particularly, I want to thank some guys who have allowed me to share in their lives this year and help me get through some very tough times. And I want to thank all of you.
Happy birthday, Tom. That's all the birthdays.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.